I was going to introduce you, but why don't you do that? Why don't you tell us about yourself, what you guys
Yeah.
are doing, how you got here, give us a 3-minute spiel on,
Yeah.
what
Well,
brought you to
I'll
this
try and
point.
keep it to 30 seconds. No one wants to hear 3 minutes of that, right?
Absolutely.
We have a podcast, called Habit Masters, and it's not because we're habit masters. We're trying to help people master the art of building habits, right? The building blocks that change their lives. Both of us. So we've done several entrepreneurial things together, and we'd always get together and be like, oh, I just read this book, right? And we talk about this, like, okay, come on, we got to get to work.
Yeah, yeah. Right,
And it
right.
finally dawned on us, like a couple of years ago. It's like, this is what we love, right? Like, why are we doing all these other things when this is what we love? So that's when we decided to start a podcast. One little niche I feel like we've kind of tapped into is you hear a lot of these gurus, and it's just like, if you had a perfect life with no distractions, no kids, like, yeah, implement all this stuff. But I have 6 kids, right? So
Mm.
I guess our niche is a little bit like how to, pursue your dreams when you really do have a lot of commitments and a lot of things. When the kid's crying in the middle of the night, it's like you got to get up and take care of them. You can't just ignore that, and that's life, right?
That's right.
So I'm not getting up at 5 a.m. to go work out and do these things when I've been up 3 times in the night, right? So
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a great point to hit on is, it's something I'm actually working on with what I'm doing with habits is to really help people customize the habits that they're forming to their own lives. Because like you just said, like everybody is like a unique snowflake and has their own set of circumstances. A parent of one has a different circumstances, a parent of 2 or 3. And even
yeah,
parents of 2 have different circumstances that each have 2 boys at
right.
the exact same age, born the exact same day. It's all just depending on your work and all these factors going into it. And so I do think like being able to help people to sort of get down to, I call them golden gamified habits, where it's like, okay, this is the habit. The golden habit is the one that's best for you in particular. Like that's the one that is customized to your personality, your DNA, your strengths, your weaknesses, your likes, your dislikes, your passions, right? And you're taking all that into account. You're saying, okay, this is the habit for this particular thing that I want to change that I should do. So for instance, like, for sports or for working out, it might be running. Like it might be, I love running. I can run for hours. That's like my wife. For me, it's the opposite. You put me on a street and I get tired in 2 seconds, but I can play basketball for 4 hours straight and not even feel like I'm winded, right? So it's like, so you find that, and then you kind of start to figure out, all right, how do I further reduce the friction on this thing? How do I gamify it? How do I make it easier to incorporate into my life? And then to me, it's just a numbers game. You just keep
Mhm.
plotting away until you get it, and you're making it obvious, you're making it easy, rewarding, satisfying, attractive, right? All these things from BJ Fogg, James Clear, Dewey, and you're just sort of slowly chipping away. So like for me, for basketball, it would be like, okay, I need to do it, so I'm going to put my gym clothes on before I go to make sure that I get off the couch. And I'm going to invite some friends to do it with me, so we're holding each other accountable, right? So you're just adding these little elements, and then all of a sudden, hopefully you get to the point where you're like, this habit's inevitable. Like I've done everything I need to do to set it up, and now it's just a matter of once it's developed, it's on autopilot.
Yeah, all those little catalysts that make it that much easier takes out the willpower. You know what I mean? So it's just like
Right,
the systems
willpower.
and
Yeah, willpower, man. Right, we both know that's like in the habits world. It's just it's almost cringeworthy work because that's what our
so
society
fleeting.
is
Yeah,
built on. Really, when you
yeah,
think about like advertising and diet programs, and you can do this, you can be rich, you can do it. It's all based on like saying, hey, do what I did. Like we were just saying, like generic advice that's not customized to you, and somebody buys it and then they do it once and then they go, oh, this is too hard, right? Or they go on a diet and they go, oh, I can't not eat, right? That's why 99% of diets fail. It's like you got to actually change who you are as a person at the core. You got to change
yeah,
these like what your belief system and what you do as a person, right? So it's like
yeah.
and I'm all about I don't know about you, I want to ask you about this, like replacing versus stopping. So you're not like trying to use willpower, but instead you're replacing that bad habit with something else. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So many thoughts here. I think that's one of the reasons why dieting just like doesn't work in general, because it's going against who we see our identity, You know what I mean? Like, you can repeat something dozens, hundreds of times, but if it goes against who you think you are, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sacrificing here. You know, instead of thinking of yourself as someone who eats healthy and exercises regularly, it's a diet. I'm like, I want to eat this because that's who I am, but I'm not. Man, it will never stick.
Right. Right.
It's got to be part of. I ask this question sometimes. It's like, do I go out and run every day for a week and that makes me a runner, or do I, make that identity shift? Like, I'm a runner and therefore I go running, right?
Right. So it's funny. I was actually just listening to James Clear. He was just on one of my favorite podcasters, Tim Ferriss' show. And it's if you guys haven't listened to it, I recommend it. I've been waiting. James Clear doesn't do a lot of interviews. By the way,
doesn't. No.
Atomic Habits, I'm sure everybody watching it.
Yeah.
One of the better, more recent habit books that kind of takes a lot of the behavioral science that's out there and does a nice job of kind of putting it together in a very digestible format with good examples to kind of be like, oh yeah, I can do that. Anyway, but he's on, and he was just, one of the quotes he said, I don't remember exactly, but it's to your point, where he said, you basically want every action you take each day is a vote towards the person that you want to become. And so just think about it like, every time you vote for who you want to become, the more you do that, then the law of compounding kicks in. And there's that front loaded hump, like it's because you're develop the habit to do something different. Now you're trying to replace it. But once you get over that hump and you keep voting enough times, and I like to use the term kind of fake it till you make it. It's sort of like, okay, this doesn't quite feel right, but I know I should be doing this. And then you figure out a way again. That's where I think the behavior hacks and the tricking your brain into taking action comes into play, and is so important, because it's like, there are ways to use the same stuff that these companies are using to sell our attention and monetize us, right? To actually trick our brains, making it obvious, easy, rewarding, satisfying, these types of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hands down. Well, there's so much science behind it for these huge companies to do it. We got to figure out how to leverage that for the things we want to achieve, rather than, their goals of keeping our attention, selling our attention,
Exactly. So with what you guys are doing, so I like it. First of all, I like that you say, I'm not an expert. We're just trying to help people. So you're like, right, you're not coming out being like, I know everything and I'm going to help you. It's more like, let's all figure this out together. What is your approach? What do you guys you say you're reading books, and then you're kind of just talking about the different things that you're learning? Do you have a system that you guys have put together? Or is it more just kind of like an open forum?
It's a little, we have a course that we have, it's, again, built for people who are busy lives. It's a 7-day habit master's course, we call it. But then, we're in the middle of writing our book called Problems You Want. Basically, like, life is a series of problems. Like, that's just what life is. And you go from survival to growth to contribution, right? You solve bigger and better problems. I mean, my 2-year-old who's, learning to potty train, learning when to stop playing and go use the restroom, right? That's a real problem, right? I've long since mastered that problem, but it never really goes away. You know what I mean?
Right.
The problems I'm trying to master is going from survival to growing myself, and then ultimately contributing to my family, to my community, to the world. You know what I mean? I think that's where the problems we all want to get to, like Tevye, afflict me with the riches that I may bless the world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And so what is your system? What are you doing every day to do that, to get there?
Yeah. Again, it all comes down to, so I can send you some stuff, we call it like a habit tracker and things like that, and some of these principles, everything. I mean, you read enough James Clear, BJ Fogg, like, things start to rhyme, is how I like to call it. You know what I mean? It's like a fresh take, a little bit nuanced, but all the people who are trying to talk about habits incorporate into your life, like, there's some rhyming to it. It's like the who, the when, the where, gamifying, like you said, getting accountability, all this stuff. Right now, we're kind of intrigued with the identity, kind of the mindset portion. You asked earlier about, do you replace, or what was your question? You were asking about, with a habit, what do you do to replace that? Or
well, I was saying, I think that stopping a habit is like relies on willpower. And I think a lot of people think about, I need to stop this habit, I need to break this habit. When in reality, it's more like, okay, I have this thing that's going on in my life that has shown up because of either my major influencers, whether it was my parents, my schooling, my peers growing up, media, social media that I'm looking at, experiences I've had. We all have different habits. We all have different lives that we lead. Like we're saying at the beginning of the show, we're all snowflakes. And before we know it, we enter into adulthood, and it's like these are kind of locked in for the most part, and it's really hard to change them. And I think what most of us do, it's like the old New Year's resolution adage is, oh, okay, I failed this year, but it's New Year's resolution, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to go to the gym. And then we go to the gym one day, and we try to do every body part, and we're like walking around like a friggin' T-Rex because we can't move. And we're like, oh, that was way too hard, right?
Yeah.
Versus trying to slowly replace things and, again, figure out those golden habits, the ones that we don't mind doing so much, right? Like, so for cardio, like I said, for me, it's basketball. I can play for 2 hours, drenched in sweat, don't even feel like I did anything because I'm having so much fun and I'm so competitive and I'm so into it. Like, you got to find what those are, and then and then you want to like replace, right, whatever it was that you were doing. If you weren't doing anything, now you're just adding something. If before you were forcing yourself to go for a run and you hate running and you found that you weren't doing it consistently, you say, okay, I need to figure out what am I replacing that with. And to me, that's the key in introducing. And then again, it's in small, easy, obvious, rewarding, satisfying ways in these small increments, so that it doesn't feel so hard, so that it's so small that it's barely noticeable to your brain, because your brain's going to resist it, right? It's that whole willpower thing. We don't want to be activated. And then before you know it, because habits don't care if they're good or bad, helping or hurting us, you've replaced that bad one with a good one, and then it's like, let's go, rocket style on autopilot.
Yeah, love it. Absolutely love it. We like to share this, we call it, a garden metaphor, where it helps a lot of people kind of recognize where they're at in their life, meaning like our life is like a garden, right? You have your plot of soil, and where you give your time and attention to, that's giving it water and sunlight. What you focus on will grow, right? And for better or worse, kind of like you're saying, whether it's genetics, whether it's our upbringing, like we all have boulders, we all have weeds, like these bad habits that just like, cut our hands and make us bleed. And, to give people some empathy, it's not your fault to a certain extent, but if anything's going to change, it is your responsibility, because nobody else but you can decide what to do about your garden, right?
Right.
And so, it's like perhaps what you need to do is find a specialist who knows how to take care of this weed that's hurt you for so long, right? Or, you talk about, it's like you're the average of your 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Find people who are growing the fruits that you want to grow, and help teach you how to get there. Do you know what I mean? How to grow those fruits.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, one of the important things I think you're talking about. So to me, it's figuring out, the first step is becoming aware. Like, okay, like I got to figure out who I am, who this snowflake is. Like, again, what are these habits that I've developed, wherever I got them from, my parents, school, experiences I've had, right? And then you shine a big old spotlight, and then you go, okay, now what are the top ones I want to work on? And then what are the things I can add into the equation to reduce the friction, to make it easier? And to your point, I think people who you surround yourself is one of the biggest things that you can do, because that old adage, you are who you hang out with. I mean, it's true. And I think there's even like the average of 3 people, and I'm sure that's not an exact science, but I will say, I think it's hard to hang out with 20 people consistently, but it is usually, most of us have 2 to 3 people that are kind of more centered in our life than others. And you do want to make sure that those people have the types of habits that you want to develop, because believe me, you're going to pick up on theirs if not.
Right. And we live in a world such that, like, whatever you want, the internet, the connection, it's like you can find a tribe, right? You can find, even if it's not like your next door neighbor, even if you can't readily know, like, you can find someone who has the goals, the pursuits, and you can surround yourself, in the social media. It's like right now, people who follow you, they like where you're going. They want to follow your lead, right? And so they listen to you and they come to you for advice. Like, that's the inputs that are, this the water that they're planting, or I would call the seed is the identity. And it's very easy, I think, changing our identity, changing our, what we want in life is is as easy as planting the seed, but like you said, you have to consistently water it so your actions are proving that identity, growing that identity till it's so strong, you know what I mean? It's like this giant tree that even when tough times come, you know, it's a drought for a few days, it's not going to like kill that plant because it's so part of who you are.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I like that analogy, right? And whatever analogy works for you, right? Like I use the rocket ship one. For me, I like that, the idea of the momentum and, you know, every single day, in order to break Earth's gravitational pull, you must slowly but surely start feeding the fuel cells of your rocket, which is made up of these 5 cores. And how do you do that? You start replacing your failure with success habits in each one of these, your mindset, your relationships, your career and your finances, your physical health, your emotional health. And each one of these, we've developed habits, and right. And you just got to start feeding it. And then the more you feed it, then you can break Earth's gravitational pull and you can get to that first milestone and it feels good. Right. And then you get into that success loop. And that's when it gets fun, because then you gain some confidence and it gives you more energy and makes you want to take action. And then you gain more success and confidence. And then it's like, now you're in your success loop versus your failure loop, which was like, you're not watering your garden or you're not feeding your rocket and you're just stuck.
I took your quiz, your Gamify Your Life quiz, you know, to see which cores I was like lacking in, right? I found that relationships and emotional were the 2 that I scored the lowest, right? And but your whole system of gamifying it, making it, I mean, there's nothing making it harder to make change than if it's like painful or drudgery. You know what I mean? That can get fun and like all those things that you preach is just, I love it.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And again, I mean, it's all just stemming from universal principles and behavioral science. I'm not talking about anything that other people haven't already talked about. It's just, I'm putting it in the way that it works for my brain. And I love video games, and I like the idea of having fun with life. To me, that's a big part of it. You know, we were all at one time, you know, these young little guys and gals filled with wonder, passion, enthusiasm, and the sky was the limit. And, you know, there's nothing we couldn't do. And play was like our number one priority. And then life gets in the way, things start happening. We develop certain habits. And then before we know it, we're just like hovering above rock bottom and trying to just get by. And that's just the worst thing that I feel like that's worse than death, because if you're not growing, you're dying. To me, the equation of happiness, ABG, always be growing. Your belief system plus your repeated actions plus time equals who you will become.
Yeah. I think you touched, I call it your vulnerability. I think it's one of the things, it's like we experience the world now, unfortunately, sometimes to everybody else's highlight reel, right? But the reality is that every single one of us, I feel like it's part of like growing up and realizing like, I haven't achieved everything I ever wanted. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just like reality kind of hits. And I think most adults have these moments in their life where it's like, regardless of you know, success in like your 5 cores and 1 or 2 or multiple cores, like we feel like failures in some of these cores, right? And I think part of the process is learning to dream again, learning to, you know, like ask more of the world again, right? And these habits that you preach is like, it doesn't have to be, okay, you don't have to get there today or even tomorrow, but as long as you're on the road, you know, you're progressing, you'll find better ways. Like, my destination is California, right? And right now I'm crawling, but at least I'm headed in the right direction. And inevitably, if I'm making forward movement, I'll find better tools, better tactics. Like you said, it's like those little accountability and all these little things that help me go from crawling to walking to running to riding a bike, taking a car, hopefully taking an airplane at some point, right? So I get there with hours and within hours rather than like days or weeks. Yeah.
Totally. So, and now how did you and your partner kind of start doing this together? And by the way, we talked earlier about relationships and the importance of who you hang out with. So that's great. You have somebody, so you're ahead of the game already, that you guys are both into this. I assume you're meeting regularly, daily. Is this like your main gig now? Is this a side gig that you guys are doing? Like, tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, it's just a side gig. It's growing. We started out as a podcast called The Gym. We would just talk about like the ideas that were, you know, striking fire in our souls, right? But the more we get into it, the more we've kind of refined and like, what we love doing is trying to help people accomplish their goals and their dreams, right? So currently it is just a side gig, but honestly it's growing kind of rapidly, and it's fun to see, you know, being able to help more people. So again, book in the works, some coaching and things like that. So we just love it so much that, like, even if nobody in the world listened to us, like, we would still put these out there for the world, for our, because it helps us grow. It's just like that virtuous cycle, right?
Totally. I love it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.